Hey, Erin, good morning.
Hi, Darmesh. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you for taking the time to uh, join us here. And I think this is a very interesting topic as we think about sales operations. And I was talking to a few people, and this question came up on how do we make operations more strategic? And I know you and I were chatting, and then we connected about a year and a half ago when you were still at Lean Data, uh, right? And we caught up, and that's when I thought of you as a perfect person to share this stuff and have a discussion on this topic. So, and it'll be great if you can just walk us through your background, right, and how you got into ops and your experience moving forward, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. So my background originally is in sales. I started out early in sales development, managed a sales development team, and then went into being an AE. So at that point, of course, I was in my 20s, I knew everything. So I saw the end-to-end sales process from the prospecting side to the closing side, and saw all of the gaps along the way and the things that were affecting us, the sales team, that were not efficient or not working correctly. And I wanted to build a better machine. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't have to deal with, hundreds of leads that weren't prioritized. This was early days of marketing automation and sorting through those manually and, not being efficient with our time, or, just having better data there and better automation there, or not knowing what our commission plans would be, and not having predictability and fairness around things like pay. So it led me to learn what operations was and start to address some of those very tactical things that would help not just my deals, but the whole sales team. So that's what got me into operations. And now for a number of years, I've been working in operations, mostly for B2B software companies, and going from those very tactical things into a lot bigger, more strategic company type operations work.
So you worked at Lean Data, you worked at Pendo, which was the last game before you decided to go back into consulting, because I think you were a consultant prior to that. You were at Sales Loft as well. So you've seen the movie of growth in growth, sometimes at at a crushing velocity. And so as you think about ops, right? What was it that would make ops roles strategic in those fast growth companies? Because a lot of times what I've seen is those companies are growing really fast, and people get caught up in doing things like you're playing a whack-a-mole almost, right? Just trying to stay afloat with all the things, and sometimes you lose sense of what is really strategic versus what's tactical. Am I working in the business versus on the business, right? And so how did you kind of balance those things out as you were scaling those companies?
That makes sense. So what I told you before was sort of how I found ops, and what we're talking about now is really how ops has evolved, right?
Yeah.
How ops has become a more strategic role. And for me, I sort of organically, piece by piece, grew from those very tactical operations things, from systems and automation and commissions, into a more strategic ops role. And for me, it was looking at the things that were, coming from sales, coming from marketing, all of these day-to-day requests that everyone gets, and starting to see the big picture and fit the pieces together and understand, from marketing to sales to customer success, what are they trying to do that is aligned or not aligned? How do we have a conversation to make sure that we can create some better alignment across these teams? And the way that happened for me was starting at SalesLoft with marketing and sales, actually looking ahead to say, what do we want to do this year, building a plan for the company. And for us, it was moving into an account-based model. So we want to not just look at our inbounds, because we were getting a great volume, great growth with inbounds, but they were not necessarily the the type of companies that we wanted to grow into. We were growing into more enterprise companies. So we said we need to go into an account-based model there. So who do we need to sell to? What are these companies? What are the roles? Asking those questions, and then, working with marketing and sales to actually put that plan in place. So it became a very collaborative process. And then, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, similarly on the customer success side, we found that we were again growing very quickly, and we had a ton of new customers, but we were not being very structured in how we engaged with those customers throughout the year. So from onboarding into renewal, what do we need to do that we ensure that they're successful, that they're growing, that they're getting value, that we're all marching in the same direction, and building those plans and determining how we measure success in those things was, again, from the handoff to sales to onboarding to customer success, a very collaborative process. And that's where I think ops can elevate from just executing on the plan to building a better plan.
So you put up two really great points, which I want to dig in. Is you had a lens of looking at the customer life cycle end to end, from marketing to sales to customer success. Unlike a lot of times in sales ops, I'm doing sales and there's another division called marketing ops, another division called customer ops, and those things break. Like, our view is that really there has to be one ops, and everybody has to have, your customer doesn't care about your org charts in general, and and so you have to have the lens of end-to-end view. If you're an ops person just focusing on sales, you're going to be caught in tactical stuff. Am I correct in that conclusion?
I think that connects really well to what you were saying earlier about working on the business, looking at how are we structured, how do we communicate across departments, how do we evaluate proposed initiatives and projects, how do we execute and measure on those projects. Yep. And so the structure of ops is a big component of that. And I know it's always in conversation because there are pluses and minuses to doing it each way. I've definitely advocated for centralizing ops, over the last few years, so that you do have that alignment. You have one, connected set of systems that everyone uses. It used to be that you have a CRM and you're maybe loading lists or manually inputting leads. It was very much an island, but now everything's connected from, marketing and sales and all the way through. So you have one, architecture of systems. You have one set of data that is, flowing through these systems. You have one customer life cycle. So it makes sense to have one team manage those things. There are, and I've seen recently, reasons where you might have ops people still report up through those individual team leaders. If, maybe this is a little bit of a tangent, but if, say, a sales leader wants help on sort of analysis and figuring out what markets to focus on, what cities, what programs, sort of, an analyst, an ops analyst, they might not need to work with the central team. They can be sort of a sales support. And I think there are situations like that, but in general, making sure that you're very much aligned.
Yeah. So actually, I'll come back to one of the things that you set up in right now, but I'll go back to the other piece that you said earlier. So we believe in one ops. That's one thing. The other thing was you said, interestingly, you got involved in the planning side, which is kind of rare for me to hear most ops people say, because then here's what my experience has been. In a fast growing company like a sales out or Pendo, the board comes up with a number, the VP of sales gets a number, and you just say, okay, you got to meet a number, and you quickly go back, right, into the execution mode. Mm-hmm. You got to be a little bigger, Series C, Series D, when you have a different sales strategy team that's building some sort of go-to-market plan. But I think you're right. You have to think about, okay, what's the plan? How do I make this plan real? And so the question for you is, how did you inject yourself in those discussions? How did you elevate the role of an ops in those kind of places where typically most people just become an order taker, right? This is a new number for this year, and we just got to hit it, and we will do whatever it takes to meet that number. So how do you change that dynamic to say, no, 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 I'm not going to take an order, but be a partner with you in helping you build and create a plan?
Yeah, I think that you and I have had some really good conversations about this, about the feedback loop of planning, where you get a number and you could be really simplistic about it and say, okay, the number is $10 million. We have $1 million quota. Let's hire 10 salespeople. Done, right? But it's a lot more complicated than that when you have, you're trying to plan out for 12 months at a time, and a lot changes in that time. You may have 2 salespeople now, you're going to have 10 by the end of the year. What sort of hiring schedule, ramp schedule, moderated quotas, sales enablement, building all of the components to make a plan successful. And then there are a lot of, if we do it this way, if we focus on this geo or this industry, how will that influence our plan? And so I think where ops can get involved, where I got involved, was looking at those scenarios. If we do this, this is what will how it will impact the plan. If we do this, this is how it will impact the plan, and using that as a conversation to create that alignment, to say, oh, okay, well, this is one layer more detailed. I have an opinion on that. The executive team, the marketing team, they very often have insights and experience in all of those components. So it's not just hire 10 salespeople and go. It's let's really build a plan, and then as you go and you see, let's say, success in one segment versus another, or ramping faster or slower than expected, you can start to improve how you execute to then use that as a feedback loop to build a better plan. So maybe it's just asking questions when you're on the order taker side to start to build it into a conversation.
I agree with you. I think that's super critical, is asking those questions to say, I'm here to help you. This is the number. Okay, let's come out. Let's look at the number and how we're going to get it. And I think the leadership wants that part.
Oh, absolutely.
They want it. They just like, we don't have it, so we're just going to run with what we have. So the closing that top down and bottoms up feedback is super important. And I think the other piece I was going to come back to is you mentioned sales support, right? And that's I think. In my view, it's a great way to look at it. That are you doing sales support work, or are you doing sales operations work? People think of those two as one bucket of sales ops, but it's really, am I supporting, or I'm just taking orders, I'm going to play whack-a-mole all day, or am I leading with a point of view?
And I think that those are two categories out of a number, right? You can be strategic in a number of areas. You can be deal desk, and that seems very sales support and very tactical and in the moment. But you can start to build an expertise around. Now we know how to approach deals better, to negotiate better, to be more efficient, to build this into our systems and future projects. So yeah, for a number of different areas, you can evolve from just being tactical to building it into an operation strategy.
Okay. So now we want to give the feedback. We want to push, give the feedback to the managers and everything else. Ops generally is flooded with metrics. It's like NFL game. You got tons and tons of metrics to measure, right? I've seen mostly them looking at pipeline reviews and close rates and win rates, and those the classic ones, right? Which are, am I arming the sales manager to be able for him to sort of track what his team is supposed to do, right? Mm-hmm. But what are the kind of things that you would measure if you want to become more strategic to close that feedback loop, right? What are the kind of things that you would say, yeah, that's par for the course. You have to do those kind of instrument, those metrics, but where should you be really spending time?
I think the metrics, question is, it can be a lot of time if you're always getting a different angle that's being requested. Can we look at it this way? Can we look at it this way? And then you end up with dozens of different metrics. The way that I approach it is, when you're looking at going all the way back to your plan, looking at your plan, we want to have this revenue number. That means this number of wins, this number of opportunities, this number of demos, looking at those key conversion points. And that's where you can start to set what is the right number for each of those things, and where do we start seeing risk factors, and when things are working and not working. And when you start to see things being very different from what is a market standard or what you would expect, that's when it makes sense to dive in and go deeper. There are so many different ways to look at the data that I think when it comes to KPIs, you have to pick those few, and then just dig deeper when you're having to figure out what's going wrong usually. And then you can use that.
Yeah, I think that's super important, because you can inundate your leadership team with a whole lot of metrics which don't matter. But you have to pick and choose the key ones that matter. And I think, when I was at Microsoft, like, one of the things we had was Steven Sinofsky. He used to run Office and Windows. And the guy was anal about how he used to run the machine. Office was a machine, right? And he had this notion of one strategy. And the one strategy meant I'm going to give one number, and the entire org aligns around one number, right? So like you brought up the revenue number. Now, then we can break down that component, right? Revenue number, are we getting new customers, or are we getting from retention?
Right.
Retention goes to CSM, and we know that that's it. Everybody aligns on those numbers. We can take down, lagging indicators and tease if we need to, but keep it very simple. Just focus on those things. At the end of the day, your leadership, and he would say, your leadership only cares about, am I meeting my number or not? Everything else is noise.
Right, absolutely. And what are the inputs to that number, like you said, where if you break down revenue between new business and existing customers, and then you look at what is growth, is it organic growth, is it cross-sell and upsell, you do get more specific for each team, but it all has to tie back to that one plan.
So really surprising is, why do most of the ops team, right, focus their time on the classic things that I think about, tools evaluation, CRM configurations. They are like, okay, I'm getting pipeline report issues or forecasting, right? To me, that's par for the course, right? That if you're just going to spend your time doing that, it's not going to allow you to elevate your game. Am I correct in that, making that assumption? Or
that is, mopping the floor instead of turning off the faucet. Like there's an element of that. As I was putting my thoughts together yesterday, I was thinking about how when I've been on really good teams, how we've done our planning, how we try to get away from a lot of that. And some of it is accepting that there are always going to be things that bubble up, ad hoc projects. But how do we plan for them? So to the original question that we were talking about today, how to get strategic for ops, my number one thing is to look at the company strategy and align ops to that. So what are our goals? Maybe we're really focused on growth this year, new customer numbers, and what projects support that. So maybe there is something within our systems that we want to look at, phone call recording and analysis and coaching, so that we have better conversion rates. Or maybe we need to implement a CPQ system so that we have more efficient contracts and closures and things like that. So it does connect back into technology projects a lot of the times. But looking at our company strategy, how we will effectively hit those goals, and what is the ops component of it? Because very often there's a sales component, we need to close this number of deals, and then there's an ops component, we need to have the right tools in place to close this number of deals. So looking at all of the players in each of those projects, and then just understanding that there is a percentage of time that the ops team is going to spend on those pre-planned long-term projects, and then a percentage of time that's going to be on, ad hoc things that come up. Something broke, something changed. I need help here. That's a part of it. So we get ahead of it as much as we can, but then we use those ad hoc things to help us plan for what we need to do next, so that we don't keep, mopping up the same spill.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is in line with the question that Chris asked, like how should RevOps define their mission relative to the overall go-to-market strategy? And what he just suggested was you have to go back to the corporate goals and understand how what you're doing applies to the corporate goal. In a growing organization, there may not be a big sales strategy team per se. So it is essentially the corporate strategy that's coming down, and you got to align yourself with that. And as you grow, you'll have a sales strategy. You have to work in partnership with the strategy team, right?
Right, absolutely. And looking at not just sales strategy, but let's say we want to, at Lean Data, one of our biggest strategies was to make everyone an ops star, right? So we wanted our customers to be successful. And how do we make sure that they're successful? If they buy our product, do we make sure that they're using it? Do we need to help them and teach them how to use it better? How do we track what's happening with that so that we can see success for our customers? So, just looking again at the ops component there.
Yeah. So you're looking at the entire life cycle of the customer, not just from a sales perspective, but it's all the way from acquisition to renewal, right? You kind of look at all the different metrics and you bring them together in the context of the corporate strategy. Right.
Yeah. And to the question you mentioned, one tool that I think is really useful is using a one-page strategic plan. So this is a David Cummings thing. He is the guy that founded Pardot. He's a template out there for a one-page strategic plan. I think that every company can have one, but every team can have one. So we would write one for our team. These are our values as a team. These are our priorities as a team. And these are our projects this quarter. And then, having the discipline to look at that and track it and to continue to evolve as the team grows gives that focus.
I think that's a great framework, because we run a company almost on the same thing as well. So, but we learned it from Salesforce, right? They used to call Benioff used to call it the V2 mom, right? What's the vision?
Yeah.
What are the values? What are the metrics? And we annually look at it every month. I think that was the first thing we wrote as we built the company. We're like, what is it? And we kind of stuck with it. It allows a couple of things. It allows teams to really figure it out and be more take more ownership in how they run, but it also gets everybody focused on the right set of metrics that matter.
Yeah, and I think it also internally, and I think this is particularly useful for ops, but helps people understand what you do. Back when I first started in sales, I was really nervous about my emails being synced into the CRM. Everyone's going to see what I'm saying. There's this big brother oversight aspect, and it made me really nervous. And I think that ops is often seen as this like big brother measuring what you're doing, telling you, if you're measuring up to the rest of the team or performance standards. But if they understand how you're supposed to work, and we're here to give you tools, and we're here to make you more efficient so that you can be successful and make all the money in the world, then you're able to build that partnership better.
Yeah, and I think that aligns with the second question that Chris asked, was how does RevOps break down the silos right across the organization to drive the metrics? And I think you have to take the lens of the life cycle of the customer. There are different teams owning those things, but you have to have a shared lens on what are those metrics. You're going back to the corporate goals and saying, are we acquiring new customers? Are we looking at retention? Who owns those things, and what each of those metrics matter, right? And like look at the flow end to end.
Yeah, and very often ops can be the bridge, right? Where I remember when I was at SalesLoft, one of the things that we really wanted to improve was our implementation success and timing. We would, have people really excited to become customers and close a deal, and then not really understand what implementation would take. And so sitting down, having the ops team and myself sit down with the implementation team and figure out what information was not being passed over from sales so that they could go into an implementation already knowing what that customer needs and what they expect. And using the systems that we had to build that bridge to say, okay, if we include this information, once a deal closes, it automatically lands in your lap. You know exactly what has been communicated. You can jump right in to do a successful implementation. So you can bridge those where, they're just focused on their job, but helping them to know what to hand off to the next person in the chain.
Yeah, I think that's super important. So moving forward now, as teams are growing and people are in careers and ops, right? And they're going to ask so how do I have that discussion, right? How do I elevate my own skill sets? What would your guidance be for them?
I think that for each person, it's really important to figure out your own superpower and your own strengths and where you want to focus. The ops people that I've worked with, some have been brand new interns still in school, and they were just absolute rock stars at technology and building out Salesforce, and that's where they wanted to grow in technology leadership, or really good at understanding these sort of strategy questions and process and communication, and growing into more of a project management and process leadership. So really looking at, for each person, where do you want to focus? And then understanding that there is opportunity in all of those things. That companies are always going to be building a better machine when it comes to technology or process or how we do projects. So really looking at what you do day to day and sort of, pivoting your own career and building the career that you want, because this is a really new career area. So you can absolutely build it based on your own strengths.
Yeah, I have this joke internally on a team. I said, there is no sales ops university. There is no curriculum being taught for people, and most people are kind of they fall into that career and they figure it out as they go along. And I think we have this opportunity to really give a structure to them, right? And the analogy that I use is, I can have a room full of furniture with no lights. You'll still cross the room. You'll just bang into a lot of chairs, or we can turn on the lights and give you a path, right? And that's our goal as why we do these chats, right? Is to just drive that more visibility and how to help people think of that. That's how you're totally right. So on that note, Erin Bush today, reflecting back on Erin Bush 10 years ago, 15 years ago when you first started, what are the kind of things you would tell that Erin that you know now?
That's a really good question. I think that like you said, when it comes to falling into this role, I really did just fall into this role. I studied economics in college, and then I went into work in technology. So it was not really the plan that I had. I think that I would tell myself that it's okay to ask questions, to challenge the way that things are done, the way that someone thinks things should be done, because things are evolving. This industry is evolving, the technology is evolving. So, I think I sort of came into sales and operations with the idea that everyone else knew how it was supposed to be done, and I had to learn it rather than, challenging it and taking things into new directions than they've been in the past.
Yeah, no, I think that's super important, because and I would concur with that. There's such an evolving field, still growing, that if you're not leading with a point of view, you will get lost in taking orders. And once you get into the order taking mode, you will be stuck in data quality hell, and pulling reports and those kind of things versus elevating the discussion. I remember one of my managers said that you want to grow, you need to let go of certain things, otherwise you're always bending down to pick stuff up, right? You're not stretching yourself to grow. And so, what are the kind of things that you would say ops leaders or people who want to grow in ops career should say, these are the kind of things I would love to let go of in order to grow, right? So,
Okay. That is a good question. I think that sort of back to a lot of the daily ad hoc tasks. I think that a lot of people do things in very manual ways or ways that they've been done rather than looking at, is there a system to do this? Is there a way to automate this? Is there somebody that I can train to hand this off to? Because if you are, you're a critical part of the process, but it's taking manual work every time, then you'll never be able to grow into what's next. I think that in this role and in a number of other roles, people get stuck in being, a critical part of the process rather than saying, how do I improve the process so that it doesn't need me anymore? And that's scary, but then I can do something else and maybe something that is a higher level.
Yeah, I know. I think that you first off, you need to be confident that there's a lot of stuff that you can get done. So that it's great to get it automated, so you can go do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. The other piece then becomes is if you're able to do that consistently, you can actually build the key question, which I hear from most ops people is, how do I create an ROI discussion around investment in ops? Ops is not a cost center. Ops is an investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Investing in ops, because it's hard for a lot of sales ops leaders who are not strategic to be able to build a business case, right? They struggle, like, oh, this is great. I like this tool, or I like this process, but I don't know how to make a business case internally. We don't have budget, right? So what would you give their guidance for them is like, how do you think about building a business case for thinking of ops itself as an area of investment versus cost?
Yeah, I think that if you can get to the numbers around the cost of not doing something. So let me think of an example. So like a CPQ system, for example. If you have, an early stage company and they're using a templated contract, that makes sense. That's what a lot of people do. But then there's the issue of, as you grow, the Salesforce opportunity might not match what's in the contract because they were manually created and they're separate, they're not related. So you might have bad data. Or if the salesperson doesn't follow the process and attach the contract into the opportunity in Salesforce, you may go back to renew that customer, not have a contract. You might not have any sort of legal standing for what they've signed. So you start to put the business at risk in that sort of situation. This is just one example of looking at risk and cost. Or, if the sales team is working out of a templated contract, maybe they are able to modify things. And even on accident, they modify things like terms and something that's been put in place to protect the company. There's huge cost there to not having things set up in a way that is secure and structured. So you can put some numbers behind that and say, okay, we're now at a point where we need a system to do these things because this is the risk that we're facing if we don't. And you can use that for any sort of investment that when you're really small, you do things manually, you don't have a lot of systems. Maybe you're starting out with a prospect list in a spreadsheet. But as you grow, you need to start putting structure and security in place.
Yeah. So as you just shifting gears a little bit, basically, just from a user perception perspective, right? So you went from sales love to lean data, from lean data you came to Pendo, right? When you were being recruited for that role, let's say at Pendo, right? Did you get a sense that this was the vision of the leaders of the company or the sales leaders when they were recruiting you? And when you got into the role, well, the organization wasn't ready to really get you to deliver on the promises that they wanted, or were you sort of finding yourself? No, they had this vision of what they were like, right? And it was the reality was a little different. And the reason for that is I'm asking is not that there's always this gap between when we are hiring someone and when they come into a role.
Mhm.
Uh, the challenge is, in my view, is when someone's hiring, they have a point of view, they have a view of how they would like that org to be, right?
Mhm.
Not whether the org is ready to be. They have that view that we want it to be like this,
Yeah.
right? So, what is the disconnect in that sense from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that's a situation with a lot of visionary leaders is that they can see the promised land. They know the vision, they know where they want to be. They might not know the path to get there or have that map already in their head. And that's part of why they're hiring somebody, right? Is to say, here's where I'm going to be, build the plan and help us to get there. And so that's a really tough situation. Prior to SalesLoft, I actually worked for a company that really did not understand operations and had, here's our customer database and here's our Salesforce, and they were separate. It was always a debate to say, like, this is really beneficial to the company if we invest here. And so it was very lucky that the leaders I worked with at SalesLoft and Lean Data really understood what they were going for when they were hiring for operations and we were building out the team. Pendo was a little bit further down the road. They were already bigger than SalesLoft or Lean Data when I got there. And so it was a little bit of a different situation where they had grown so much without putting a lot of structure in place. And so they were sort of saying, we need to go back to the basics and figure out a lot of these things so that we can be more, like we were talking about before, structured and secure and predictable and all these things, and not just grow because we have an awesome product. So, so when you're going into a job, like you said, really uncovering what the vision is and asking enough questions so that you can start to see the map before you go in and start to understand what it's going to take, because it is often like a lot more than an executive leader would expect. That it's not just hiring me, it's hiring probably a team, it's systems, it's a lot of things that have to work together to accomplish this vision.
That's great, because that's really what I wanted you to sort of hear from you as well, is because a lot of time ops people feel that, hey, my management is not thinking of the role as strategic, like what should I do? But the reality is there's a lot of responsibility on ops people themselves in making this role strategic, all the way, like you started in the beginning, right? Are you building a feedback loop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you involved in top down, bottoms up, or are you just taking a number and running with it, right? So getting yourself involved in building the strategy, leading with a point of view, right? Which is like, okay, if this is what you want to do, this is how you should think about it. Leading with a point of view, making sure the leadership can believes in that, the single customer unified view, which is like sales ops should take a kind of a role in centralizing into one ops, right? We have this unique opportunity of bringing marketing ops and customer ops together. Pick the right set of data that you want to show, not everything, but what are the key metrics going after of that one strategy, one number example that he gave, then breaking down from there. But in the end, those are all those things that'll help make ops be seen as an investment worth making. Versus, I think you said that your first one of your customers, even before SalesLoft, was just very tactical. Do this, do this, do this, and I think ops people have a responsibility that when they hear that approach, it's like run, run, run. Right.
Right. And really challenge it, because I know that we're really polite and nice people,
Yeah.
but to say, if you want me to do this, if you want me to, what's a good example? Modify our contract for every deal so that, every customer is special and unique, and we don't know the terms, we don't know what we've sold them. Are you trying to just get customers in the door? Are you trying to be able to renew them? Are you trying to make sure that they adopt? Like really pushing back on what's being asked and communicating what the consequences will be of certain decisions, because that that can be a tough conversation, but they're important to have.
Yeah, well, it's critical to have that, right? Because you're building your own career as well, and you could be trapped in a role where nobody thinks of ops. They think of ops as more as sales support. I think that you crafted it very well. It's you have to think between, are we ops or sales support, and don't confuse the two things, right?
Yeah.
There's sales support, and then there's sales ops, and we generally have to do that. From a career perspective, I think I just you bought this notion, which is interesting as well. Like, if you're just looking at tools, and that's okay, you're young, you're passionate about tools, you can go into IT, because there is this evolving now sales IT. In fact, ops, in my
and I think that's part of the ops team.
Go ahead.
I think that's part of the ops team, right? In at least companies that I've worked in, all of the SaaS products used by marketing, sales, and customer success are managed by ops. It's a component of the ops team. It's not the entirety, though.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. Then we have to sort of learn to let go to grow, right? If you're not going to let go, like you said, automate a bunch of things, right? Just try to get ourselves out of that business to move forward and move up. So no, I think those are great things as you try to make strategic. Now, moving forward, as you now talking to customers, or you're advising them, right? How do you paint the vision for them? Like, what is possible when ops becomes strategic, right? So what are the kind of things that you would say? Yep. If I see this happening, I know you have a well-run ops organization, right? Versus, your ops team is just right now butted in break fix.
That's interesting. I don't know that I'm usually having the conversation in those words. So I'm trying to translate it to like the conversations I'm having with clients about what are they trying to do. And the way that I usually communicate it is, you have a revenue organization. Your revenue organization is marketing, sales, customer success, and ops. It's a four-legged stool. You need all of them to work. So building out all of those components to work together so that you can hit your company goals. And so the way that we were talking earlier about what are the company goals, what projects are required to accomplish them, and who needs to be involved from each of those teams. So how is ops involved in all of those? I don't know if I even usually say like, hey, ops needs to be strategic. I think I kind of assume that all of those teams are components of the overall company strategy.
Yeah, and I think you're right. They are all overall company strategy. But going back to our ownership of ops, it's for us to make the case that, hey, we are an investment. You have invested in this team. We are not a cost center, right? Let's be very clear, because a lot of times, like I was talking to some people here, leaders, and they say a sales leader doesn't really care about the quality of an ops person's life. He just do it because if I have a dollar to invest, I'll rather go hire a revenue generating head versus in making an investment in ops, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's time for us to sort of change that, and the only way you do that is by having those discussions about we are an investment.
Yeah, that makes sense when you put it that way, and that's where looking at the impact, the cost of or benefit of where you invest, and whether it's hiring another salesperson, buying another system, hiring another ops person, what can you expect and what will be the outcome of those things, and starting to be able to get ahead of those decisions in your planning. I think is really important, and just thinking about, as much as this role and the industry is evolving, we are seeing best practices and ratios and things that you can steal from as you build out your plan, and not just say, we're going to have one person manage Salesforce and have 100 salespeople. That just won't work.
Yeah, I think we have to get away from those ratios pieces. So we are almost at the end, but there are two questions from Justin, which will be a great way to sort of end this. Is what is been your biggest win so far, and that has made that experience so memorable for you. Um, and the second part of the question is, or the second question is, what would you say are the top 3 traits of the best sales ops professionals if you were to go and hire and recruit people?
Okay. Biggest win for me, I think, is in the people, in looking at the people that I have worked with over the years and looking at how their careers have taken off. Thinking of SalesLoft, when I started there, revenue operations wasn't a thing. We were just sales ops. And then as we worked across the whole revenue cycle, we rebranded ourselves as RevOps, and everyone from that team has gone on to do really cool things and sort of leading their own teams. And similarly in my team at Lean Data. So the people and watching them grow and helping to be a part of that is the thing that I'm most excited about. The three, sorry?
Yeah. The second, I was just going to bring up the second part, which is like the 3 attributes of a good sales ops professional that you would look for.
Yeah. So the 3 attributes I think are, I don't look at experience a lot. A lot of the people that I've worked with came from sales or customer success or other sorts of technology roles where they just had the right attributes as a person. So very often it's curiosity. They want to figure out what works, what's not working, how to fix it, what's going on. So curiosity is probably number 1. The next, I think, would be collaboration. It's so important to see all of the stakeholders in the customer journey that we're trying to support, and seeing that the marketing, sales, and success people are our customer, and the better that we can serve them, they can serve the company's customers. So the collaboration aspect. And then the last, I think, is probably communication. So we deal with a lot of moving parts, a lot of data, a lot of systems, a lot of people. Being able to boil that down into very clear, here's where we are, here's what we're doing next, here's how this fits into the overall plan. Those communication skills are key.
Curiosity, collaboration, communication. I think that's awesome. Now, I think they're right on targets. Aaron, thank you so much. I think this was, I really enjoyed the conversation. This is really, we're aligned. We think the same way. And, I think I resonated at least with the conversation. And hopefully others who listened to it found it useful as well. But thank you for your time. And
thank you for having me. This was great.
Thank you. I think look forward to keep working with you.
All right. Bye.
Take care.